안녕 친구들. I hope you've been well. I know you feel as though you're seeing the same outfit over and over again, but I had a little bit of time and I wanted to get a start on my second project of 2015, which is to review for you 2 episodes, hopefully each week, of one of my favorite drama series called Road Number 1. It aired in 2010, and right around the time actually that Song Yun-kwan scandal was broadcasting. And for the most part, my average schedule, I can only really focus on one, at most two, and because I was recapping Song Yun-kwan scandal at the time, I just didn't have time to watch Road Number 1. Plus, it was this huge, heavy, intense war movie, and despite the stellar casting of Seo Ji-seop, Yoon Kye-sang, and Kim Han-il, I just stayed away from it for a while. It did kind of register on my radar, but I looked at it and I was like, Song Yun-kwan scandal, Road Number 1. Of course, Song Yun-kwan scandal won. So it was, I would say, back in about 2013 that I somehow came across it again, and part of it was because I had seen The Master's Son. I was watching it at the time, and Seo Ji-seop portrays Chu Jung-won, and during the lull of waiting an entire week for the next installment of the series, I came across Road Number 1, and so I'll link down in the description bar a link for you if you want to take a look at what that's like. It's got English subs and things like that, but I remember watching it and thinking, wow, this is really good. And then I ended up watching it again, and part of it, let me review for you. I like Road Number 1 as much as I do because it resonates with me on a much more personal level. So if you don't have similar, background as I do, or certain expectations or what have you, you may watch Road Number 1 and find that it leaves you cold, or you feel like, oh, it's like any typical war movie. What is she raving on and on about? But for me, it hits a much more personal note, and the reason why is this. My grandmother and grandfathers went through that time period. My parents were born right at the cusp of Korean War. And I had heard about Yu-Gi-Oh, June 25th, here and there, but it's something that, because I was never educated or raised really in Korea, I came to the United States when I was 5. It's not something that I'm particularly familiar with, and as I got older and I wanted to ask my grandmother more and more about things in her past, that has always been a time period of her life I have never been able to ask about. Not necessarily that I couldn't, I'm sure I could have and she would have answered, but from a personal standpoint, I just didn't want to ask her about a time period that is so heartbreaking for her. Her hometown is in North Korea. When I asked my parents actually recently, I found out that my great grandfather, so her father, had passed away before the 38th parallel went into effect, and she was fortunate enough to have her mother, my great grandmother, with her when that line went into effect. But my grandmother is the youngest of 7 children, and I thought when that 38th parallel went into effect, she was effectively cut off from the rest of her 6 siblings, who were much older than her, and my grandmother is now 95. Her brothers and sisters are long gone, certainly, and from their standpoint, you have to wonder, they lived what was left of their life without their mother, because the mother was in the south part of Korea with my grandmother, and just the idea of families being torn asunder by something that happens so suddenly in war. That suddenness really is very effectively shown through this series. And so episode 1 and 2 of Road Number 1, it does such a great job because it literally plunges you into a battle scene. And Lee Jang-woo is the character that Seo Ji-seop portrays, and the director has done this really great thing where he'll intersperse these intense war scenes with flashbacks of a much more idyllic time. And through those flashbacks, we get a clear idea of how Chang-woo fell in love with Suyeon, Kim Suyeon, who is the character that Kim Han-il portrays. And Korea back then was still, the remnants of that feudal system was still in place. So Chang-woo's character was very much the son of the servant, and then Suyeon was definitely the daughter of, or the lady of the house, so to speak. And so you see this relationship where Chang-woo really is so head over heels in love with her that his dream really, and it's such a simple and laughable dream in many respects, but his dream in life is to be able to draw her every day, which he actually does. And it's so, if you are in the mood for watching a piece of Korean history, this series would definitely be it. If you're not, and it's too intense, I would say stay away from it. But for me, usually, and if you've been on my blog or been watching, me long enough, you know that I don't like to watch a lot of intense things. But this certainly has tapped my imagination, and it has somehow resonated with me. And so that's my goal, is to review this series to, till the end, which is episode 20. So anyway, going back to the review of episodes 1 and 2, though, we see very quickly how quickly that war happens, because literally at the end of episode 1 is the start of the Korean War, and Chang-woo had been presumed dead because he had enlisted as a soldier so that he can help pay for Suyeon's medical school, which I found very startling, because Korea is very much a patriarchal society, and the fact that a female character back in that time, in the 1940s, could go to medical school, it was just mind-boggling. And she's not a nurse, but she's a doctor. That I found very interesting. And so he enlists himself in, as a soldier so that he can help pay for her education. And then in the midst of that, she learns, of course, there's an error, clerical error, but he is listed as, dead in action, and then, or killed in action. And so she is stunned, and she's about to die. And then Yoon Kye-sung's character, Shin Tae-ok, who's fallen madly in love with her, literally at love at first sight, he stops her and he somehow convinces her to give him a shot, and they're about to marry. And Chang-woo, of course, shows up, returns technically from the dead the day before, or the day before the wedding. And then the day of the wedding, as Chang-woo and Tae-ho and Suyeon are kind of in this love triangle already, war breaks out, and Chang-woo is forced back into service, even though he was trying to get discharged. And then, of course, Tae-ho, because of some misunderstanding, assumes that Suyeon is a communist and has knowingly and consciously sabotaged one of their military missions. And so he's on the hunt, not only on a personal level to ask her, did you ever love me, but also to prosecute her and bring her in as a commie. So that's kind of the premise of episodes 1 and 2, and then you see the families being separated in episode 2, and then the soldiers really trying to stay alive first off, and then do their role in war. So one last comment in parting before I end this video. I did find it sad that Road No. 1 never really found a audience. I think when it broadcast back in 2010, its ratings were in the single digits, sadly. And part of it, I think, had to do with the subject matter. No matter how great the acting, and the budget was insane for this because of all the explosives and things like that. And the cast, it's an all-star cast. I think if you were to see it, you would be surprised just by how many awesome actors are involved in this project. But I think it's just one of those things where, certainly, despite the star power, the younger generation, the teenagers, weren't going to fangirl over it or fanboy over it. And then, the middle-aged group after a long day work. It's such a heavy topic. They probably didn't want to revisit something that some of them had actually lived through or were born around that time. And then certainly, of course, the elderly generation probably was too painful for them to, watch. So, for me, this is definitely a pet project of mine to bring to YouTube. A little bit more attention to Road Number One. I don't know how many of you will be watching this video, but I hope that you will give this series a, try. I found it very compelling. And, as I said before, it's because, my personal background of wanting to know what had my grandparents gone through. Just a little bit of that, But even if you're not Korean by birth or by heritage or what have you, I think there are enough countries in this world, sadly, who have been, that have been torn apart by war, having to deal with war and things like that, that I think the issues that this series brings up will resonate with enough of you. And personally, this is one of my favorite things. And those of you who follow me on my blog, since I was, 12, my favorite male fictional character has always been Fitzwilliam Darcy. And when I saw Road Number One, Lee Chang-woo as the character has usurped Darcy. I know, shocking, I know. But that was how impressed I was by this show. So if you have some time and you have the inclination, I would highly, highly recommend this. So if you're on this Road, Number One adventure with me, I hope to see you next week with a review of episodes 3 and 4. So take care, everyone. Bye.